Hey, what up? As someone who's British and specialises in a killer that uses a knife, you should already know that you're in the hands of a professional, because as you've likely seen the thumbnail or read the title, I'm going to be making a tier list on every single add-on for the Legion in Dead by Daylight. But, just before we begin, let's play a quick round of rock, paper, scissors. If you lose, you gotta subscribe, okay? Those are the rules. Alright, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. If you won, congratulations, here's your prize of funny money. If you lost, however, you gotta pay up with that subscribo, bozo. I mean, let's be honest, you can always immediately unsubscribe or not even do it at all. But hey, maybe stick around, it might be worth your while. But anyways, no more fooling around, let's get into the tier list, baby. Alrighty then, so here we are with the tier list. We have a total of 20 add-ons to go through, and I guess we start off with BFFs, because that's the order they decided to give us for whatever reason. You know, I'm not really too bothered, we're going to go through all of these anyway, and we're probably going to end up mixing and matching these around later on because, well, my opinion might change depending on how I feel. And, we're going to switch these up a little bit. I mean, A, B, C, D? Nah, that's boring, bro. Come on, we're going to give it some funky names. So we'll do S for, well, Stabby, because, well, we do plenty of stabbing as a Legion, so I think that's quite fitting. We could have A for either Adept or Aggressive. I think Aggressive fits a Legion more, so we'll go with Aggressive. You know what, we'll just go with Blade, because I really can't think of anything better to put here. Like, I could put Better, but that doesn't really fit the theme, you know? Or I could go for Boost, because they're quick, but I feel like that would fit something more like, I don't know, the Blight. So, we'll stick with Blade. I mean, we have to go C for Cut, surely. Like, what else could it be? It has to be Cut. And then what about D? Defeat? Or maybe Dislike? I don't know, we'll go with Defeat, because I feel like if you take these, you're just asking to lose anyway, since the Legion is kind of dependent on their add-ons and build quite a lot, because, well, if you don't take the right stuff, you're probably going to end up losing. It's hard enough to get a 3 or 4k as it is, so if you take these, you're not going to have a very fun time. And then I suppose for F, we'll just call that one Legion, because Legion's just F tier anyway, so, well, they're like F plus tier now, since they had some buffs, but realistically, still not a great killer. And yeah, there we are, that is all of them sorted. Now it's time to talk about these. So, first things first, BFFs. This I would put in, either A or B tier. It's definitely not S tier, just because it's very dependent on endgame. Like, sure, the stacks are nice and you get 6% haste, but it's very situational and you kind of need, like, no way out or no ed. So, sure, the extra speed is nice, but I wouldn't say it's really game-changing, and it's way too circumstantial. Unless you go for an endgame build, this thing just kind of sucks. Okay, so next we have the Defaced Smiley Pin. Honestly, I'd put this in either A or B tier. I think this thing gets slept on, especially if you run something like Thanatophobia. So with just that, I'd put it in A tier. I'm just going to say, I think it is really underestimated. Think about it this way. You get Mangled, 25% reduced healing speeds, really nice. And when you have Thanatophobia, survivors are almost inclined to heal themselves. And comparing that to something such as the Legion Pin, they're broken, and when you're broken, you can't heal anyway, so you have to do something like unhooks or gens. This, on the other hand, you have the option to heal, so if the survivors choose to heal to counter your Thanatophobia, it's going to stall out their game a lot longer. Now obviously good survivors probably won't do that, but against lesser skilled ones, this is really, really strong. So that's why I'd put it in A tier, possibly B, but I think for now A is a really good spot for it. Okay, so next we have the Etched Ruler. Honestly, I'm not too sure about this one. On one end, I think it's really good because you can get 5-hit frenzies a lot easier, but saying that, the Oblivious status isn't game-changing. It works really well with like Plaything or like jump scare builds, right? Or full stealth Legion. But realistically, good survivors will know to run away from you regardless of if they can hit your tear radius or not. So I mean, I'd probably say B tier for this. Maybe it's a little bit better than I think it is, but personally, this thing just kind of doesn't really do much, especially if you're in chase. Like, if you want to mind game a loop, for instance, a survivor that keeps their eyes on you, there's not really much you can do. Like, tear radius or not, they know where you are at all times, so you can't really mind game them either. So the best bet is just to catch them off guard, or if you know where they're hiding. for instance the Stab Wound Study, right? If you don't use that with the Etched Ruler, you're kind of handicapping yourself a little bit. Okay, next we've got Filthy Blade. This could either be B or it could be S tier depending on how you play them. So obviously with the name Stabby, that would imply that you like to do a lot of stabbing. So with Frenzy, this thing is great. You go for hit and run playstyle, boom, lots of mending time. I mean, a whole 4 seconds per mending, huge. That can save you at least a minute in a game. That's a lot of time, and obviously time is very important as a killer because the longer you have in a game, the more mistakes the survivors could make, and of course that gives you a better chance of winning. But if you like to commit to a chase rather than go for the frenzy, this probably isn't as valuable because, well, you're not going to be stalling out as much time, and so with that, as I say, it comes down to playstyle and preference, so I'd probably put this in A tier just because of that, but probably on the higher end, because obviously this thing is just really good regardless, and it's just very valuable. Oh boy, Frank's Mixtape. Right, so this can be hit or miss, because on one end it can be good, because you can maintain frenzy in between a chase, but generally speaking, it doesn't really do much for me. So I'd probably say B tier here. I mean, some people really love this add-on, and I don't blame them, since, you know, you can kick generators and break walls without losing the frenzy. But usually it doesn't really change much, I'm gonna be honest. It's probably more valuable than the Etched Ruler, but I wouldn't say it's better than the BFFs. I'd probably put it here. I think that's a pretty decent spot for Frank's Mixtape because, like I say, I think it also comes down to playstyle as well. I personally don't really see much value out of this, but it can definitely come in handy at times. The good old Friendship Bracelet. This is definitely S tier. It's not even a competition, it is just very good. It's built-in coup de grace on your frenzy, so you can get some crazy lunge hits, and the amount of times that I've maintained frenzy because of that add-on alone just shows how good it is. And plus, it's a bronze add-on. There's not really much about this that you can say is bad. The only times that it kinda sucks is if a survivor pre-drops a pallet as you're about to lunge, but even then, it doesn't really cost you that much time. And at the end of the day, if that happens, it happens. It's kind of a skill issue. But overall, this thing has saved me many times, and it's just really good. Okay, and now we are on to the iridescent add-ons, which are conveniently enough right next to each other. So, Fuming Mixtape. This is very good. It's basically Hex Ruin plus Surveillance. So if you want 2 perks in one, this is your go-to add-on. But generally speaking, it's not game-changing just because it only applies during Frenzy. So I'd probably put it in A tier just because of that. If it regressed all the time, S tier, without a doubt. But it only applies whilst you're in Frenzy. So on one end it is good because you're chasing people off of gens during Frenzy anyway, so it's going to immediately regress. But I wouldn't say it's game-changing. Same for the Surveillance. Surveillance is nice because it gives you a good amount of intel, but generally speaking, you're going to be wanting to apply pressure most of the time anyway, so as long as you already know what gens survivors are working on, it doesn't really make much difference. But overall, I'd say it's still an A tier without a doubt. Now, the other iridescent add-on, the Iridescent Button, is without a doubt S tier. Probably the best add-on, not gonna lie. I'd put it at the top, just because it nullifies everything that makes the Legion weak. I mean, think about it. Pallets are the only thing that the Legion struggles against, so all it takes is you to stab them during Frenzy, they drop the pallet and stun you, or they just drop it beforehand. You vault over it, you cancel your Frenzy, boom. What can they do now? The pallet's broken, they've got nowhere to run to, and it's just a free down. There's really nothing that sucks about this add-on, it's just very powerful. So there's barely any counterplay to it either. You mix that with Julie's Mixtape, Enduring, and Spirit Fury, you're unstoppable. It is really good, and it requires barely any effort to really run. Now, of course, the only downside is that it is iridescent, making it very rare, but outside of that, the add-on as itself is just incredibly good. Oh boy, Joey's Mixtape. This is definitely not Legion tier, but it's very close. I'd probably put like Defeat or Cut tier, just because it does have some value, but not a lot. So, you hemorrhage people, which means they bleed more, and if they stop healing, the healing progress regresses. But like, it doesn't really do much. It's just, it doesn't do anything. Unless you interrupt someone healing, that's the only time you're really going to get value out of it. And like, it's just bad. It's not terrible, it does have some value, that's why I say it's not going in Legion, but it's pretty damn close, I'm not gonna lie. Next we've got Julie's Mixtape. Now, as I've said, this can be very viable in a lot of builds, especially Enduring and Spirit Fury, but on its own, probably C tier. It's good for new players, but that's about it. Sure, you can get interrupted during Frenzy on some funky palettes at times, like they'll clip you around a corner, and you know, sometimes that does suck, but generally speaking, it rarely happens, and that's the only time this would actually come in handy for an experienced Legion player. So, with all of that in mind, sure, it's great for some of the builds, but outside of that, it just kind of doesn't really do much. The good old Mischief List. This actually used to be really good before the Legion buffs. I mean, it gave you a whole 2 seconds on your Feral Frenzy, now it only gives you 1. I don't really use it anymore. Before it was probably S to A tier without a doubt, but currently with the buffs, it's probably more C to B tier. Probably C tier, honestly, there's not really much point in bringing it. That extra second doesn't really change much. And the Friendship Bracelet, the lunge is just better than that 1 second that you get during it. Now, the Mural Sketch is a funny one. This one is interesting because, same as the Mischief List actually, it was actually quite good, like you used it pretty much every game. But now, I mean, it still has its value and purpose, but with the new playstyle on Legion, primarily being for the M1s rather than the Frenzy, I mean, it kind of depends. On smaller maps, this thing is incredibly good, maybe A tier. I think we'll put it in A tier, but definitely on the lower end. There are definitely much better options, but it is still very good, especially if you put it with, oh, here we go, the Never Sleep Pills. So, the Never Sleep Pills as well, this used to be very good, and to be honest, it still is, but again, because of the Legion buffs, it's not really as good as it used to be, because the Legion can enter their Frenzy a lot more frequently now, meaning they can cover a lot more distances a lot more easier. So, generally, you only really want to bring this for the blood points now, or if you want to go for a 5-hit Frenzy. So mixing that with the Mural Sketch, definitely a great idea because you stack more movement speed. But outside of that, I mean, it's pretty bad on its own because it doesn't really provide you much and survivors can very easily run away. So this is probably going to go in C tier, I'm not going to lie. It used to be much better, but I mean, it comes down to preference and playstyle. I just think you lose out on too much mobility, so I'm going to put it in C. I think that's a pretty decent spot. Oh boy, the Etched Ruler. This thing used to be pretty bad, not gonna lie, but because of the Legion buffs yet again, this thing is easily S tier, I'm not gonna lie. Reducing the Feral Frenzy cooldown by a whole 5 seconds is insane. It is... wow. The amount of time that saves is incredible, especially with the new playstyle now, where you use your Frenzy for mobility rather than just for chases. So obviously, you can get to a spot a lot quicker, you stop, you get your Frenzy back up, and then you continue. It's just really good. And because of how short the Frenzy cooldown is already, you save so much time with this thing. I believe it's technically 8 seconds rather than 10 seconds on the cooldown, because once you exit Frenzy, the cooldown immediately begins. So by the time you recover, your Frenzy is already at 8 seconds cooldown. That is wild to think about. So looking at that right there, Friendship Bracelet and Etched Ruler, really good combination. Both of them are bronze add-ons, which means you're never going to run out of them, and it's just really, really strong. So just take it. I would say that this is really good. I would argue that this is definitely better than the Bracelet in some sense, just because of how much time that it saves and how often you can use the Frenzy. The Smiley Face Pin. This one, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one. Against survivors that rely on aura reading, probably A or S tier. But if they don't, probably C or B tier. It's not awful, it's definitely not D tier, but I wouldn't put it any higher than B. Like, if survivors rely on stuff like windows of opportunity, this thing's definitely A or S tier, because the survivors panic, they're like, ooh, where are the windows, where are the vaults, you know. But if they already know where to go and they have a plan in mind, it's kind of useless. It doesn't really do much for you. I'll probably stick this in C tier, honestly. It doesn't really give you that much value in comparison to everything else, and it can be decent at times, but it's nothing game-changing. So here we've got Stab Wound Study. This is one that I mentioned before, but as I've said, it only really works with Oblivious builds if the survivor doesn't know where you are. Because generally speaking, honestly, I'm going to put this in C tier. I'm just going to put it in C tier. If survivors are mending, they're going to be on the other side of the map anyway, because you're going to be, in a frenzy. You're already going to be chasing somebody else. So it's great for intel and knowing where the other survivors are, but generally speaking, unless you lose them, that's the only time it really comes in handy, because obviously you lose a survivor during frenzy, they mend, you see where they are, you can continue a chase. But usually you're going to be chasing someone whilst everyone else is mending anyway, so what's really the point in bringing it? Yeah, the stolen sketchbook. Don't ever bring it. It's useless. Goes in Legion tier, no doubt. It is Franklin's demise, but when they drop the item, it doesn't lose charges. It costs the survivor a total of 0.5 seconds of their life. And even if you went up against a bully squad that all use flashlights, sure, you can make them drop their flashlights, but they're just going to pick them back up. They can still blind you whilst they're in deep wound state, so even if you down someone and they go to flash save, it doesn't do anything. Like, they still have the item, they still have the full amount of charges, it just doesn't do anything. This thing is a waste of time and a waste of an add-on slot. There is, honestly, 0 point in bringing this. It is legitimately just awful. Next we've got the stylish sunglasses. Now, I don't really see the point in bringing this, so I'd probably put it in like low C, maybe high D tier, just because it's Nurse's Calling, but only when they're mending. So basically, the only time you're ever going to really want to bring this is maybe if you bring the Etched Ruler and they're Oblivious. That's probably the only time you would ever really use it, because even then, if the survivors have eyes, they can just see that you're coming back for them. So they can just stop mending, run away, loop you, and you're just back to doing an M1 killer thing anyway. And it's not like the deep wounds will regress and they'll bleed out, because as long as they're running, it pauses the timer. Next we've got Susie's Mixtape. Now, I don't really see the point in this one either, if I'm going to be completely honest. It increases the killer instinct by 20 meters. So, whilst you're in Feral Frenzy, once you've hit someone, you can see where the rest of the survivors are from a little bit further of a distance. So I suppose in one end it is useful for intel, but it really doesn't do all that much, because generally speaking, if a survivor's that far enough away to begin with, you're probably not going to catch up to them. So I'd probably put it in maybe C tier just because of the intel it provides, but overall I still wouldn't really recommend bringing this, just because you're really rarely ever gonna get a 5 hit, even with this equipped, because as I say, the survivors will just run away, and you can't really catch them in time. And last but not least, we have the Legion Pin. Now, I've already compared this to the Defaced Smiley Pin, so you could probably imagine that I'd put it a little bit lower. So maybe low-end A tier, high-end B tier. Main reason being is that because they're broken, they have less options. They don't have the choice to heal. So that means survivors either have to go for unhooks or rush gens, compared to the Defaced Smiley Pin, which gives them the option to heal. And obviously, it's a little bit of mind game strategy, right? But when survivors are broken and they can't heal, they tend to be a lot more adept, so it might be a lot harder to actually find survivors and chase them down, especially around loops and such. They might end up pre-dropping a lot more often, so it can actually hinder you more than actually help you. And so, there we are, ladies and germs, the ultimate tier list for every add-on on the Legion in Dead by Daylight. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more, make sure to let me know by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment, as I do try my best to read and reply to every single one. So I'd like to know your opinion on my tier list and whether you agree or disagree with where I've placed the add-ons. If you've also got any ideas or suggestions for future videos, feel free to throw them my way, because I will definitely have a look. Well, anyway, that's all for now. Thank you, dear viewer, for watching this video until the very end. It seriously means a lot to me, thank you. And I'll hopefully catch you later, so take care.